Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to this morning's edition of Contractors Chatter. As you come into the room, grab your business bestie, your contractor's notebook, and your favorite beverage. We have some things we want to talk about this morning, so let's get ready. For everybody on my other platforms, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to check my settings. I don't always see your messages until after my broadcast. However, I will go back and respond to any messages or comments that you leave. So comment anyway. So how are you doing this morning? I was a little off my game yesterday. However, I pushed through and delivered some content. I need to go back and edit that video. All of the past episodes of Contracting Chatter are available on my YouTube channel. So you can go back, I think about a year. No, you can go back longer than that because you can see the morning tidbits episodes on my YouTube channel. So you can go back, check out all of my previous episodes. Some of my master classes are on my YouTube channel as well. So we have that. This morning, I want to talk to you about various areas of compliance in business and government contracting. Because Contracting Chatter, we talk about all things business, all things government contracting. We cover legislation. We cover regulations. We cover aspects of government contractors are businesses. I do not understand why people want to separate the two. But every government contractor is a business. This morning, we're going to talk about compliance. There are 15 key areas of compliance every government contractor needs to keep an eye on. And these 15 areas can cause you to lose a contract, quite simply put. I've been in government contracting for over 20 years. And the majority of that time was spent as a compliance officer. Simply put, I have performed audits. I have worked on disclosure statement audits, labor floor audits, incurred cost submission audits. all of that. So when I'm speaking from audit perspective, I'm speaking from industry experience. And I want to clarify something because I popped into another contracting experts live, and he said you can 100% outsource all of your contracting work. And admittedly, I didn't hear everything he said, but I want to say this. There's an area of compliance that says that's wrong. There's a FAR clause that says that's wrong. In essence, if you win, and when you win a contract, and if you farm out 100% of that work, when that contract is audited, the first thing the auditor is going to do is look at your invoices. And if they see you performed none of the work, what they will do is take any of the costs that was not your work, not performed by the subcontractor, and ask for a refund and attach penalties and interest to it. Because FAR states that you must add value to the contract. It's one thing if you are administrating, it's one thing if you are managing, it's another thing if you are doing none of the work and you're a paper pusher. And we'll talk about that later when we cover some of the other areas. But let's talk about the 15 key areas of compliance that every government contractor needs to know. The first area is FAR. That's the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Now, every contract in government contracting is not FAR covered, but some contracts have FAR clauses included by reference. So you need to be aware of that. I'm going to say it again. Every contract is not FAR covered. However, some contracts have FAR clauses included by reference. So you need to be aware of FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Now I'm going to go here. There's something called DFARS, which is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation. Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation. Obviously, those cover defense contracts. Those are in reference only to contracts relegated to, I'm not going to say Department of Defense, but contracts governing defense acquisitions. All contracts obviously are not covered by DFARS. However, when you're reading the RFPs, you need to see if there are some DFARS clause included. The second area of compliance, right now we're just doing a brief overview. Some of my contractor roundtables, so in my master classes, I'll deep dive into these areas. The second area, we're talking about CAS. Good morning, Zeke, which is the cost accounting standards. That is government accounting. You become CAS covered once you're awarded a $75,000 contract. You're now CAS covered. There are various tripwires in government contracting. If you're in my private Facebook group, I have a tripwire listing in that group. Matter of fact, I need to update it. Now, there's a thing where if you're 75,000, you're CAS covered, you go under, you're not CAS covered. People used to want to argue that ridiculous stance back in the early 90s. Then there was a ruling made that once you become CAS covered, you're always CAS covered. Once you're CAS covered, you need to develop a disclosure statement and you need to become ready for auditing. That is why you're issued a cage code at the time you register in SANS. Your cage code assigns you to an audit office. That's what your cage code does. A lot of people don't realize what the purpose of the cage code is. It assigns you to an audit office. It also tells the government if the cage code has several functions, but the primary one is to assign you to an audit office. Another key area of compliance coverage is your small business subcontracting plan. Once you become CAS covered, you are required to have a small business subcontracting plan. Now, somebody is saying, but I'm a small business myself. Keep in mind, the way people talk in a common vernacular about small business is not how small business is defined. People are using small business wrong. Small business, as defined by the SBA, is any business earning less than $19 million, depending upon the NAICS code. And then small business within government contracting is a company that is subcontracting to you. So, yeah, you need to have a small business subcontracting plan. And that is where, as if you had joined in for my contractors roundtable at the beginning of the month, the certifications come in. Do you have a plan? If you joined in for my contracting a business week, we talked about that power partnering. We talked about that contracting plan. We talked about being a prime versus a sub. We talked about all of that, and your subcontracting plan is a part of that plan. We discussed all of that. Another area of compliance is your labor laws. You have to understand labor laws. You have to ensure that you're keeping the proper records. Go to my training center, sign up for my contractors roundtable because we're talking about record keeping, because you have to keep the proper records. I'm going to tell you one of the biggest myths running around here is that somebody is exempt or non-exempt because you say it. Somebody is salaried because you say it. No, there are tests. The Department of Labor have tests set up. And if they pass these tests, they're salaried. If they don't pass these tests, they're hourly. It's not because you decided, it's because the Department of Labor has set a standard. And you have to follow these labor laws. There are minimal salaries. And I'm going here. If you're in government contracting, there are certain contracts that have something called, and it fell out of my head. There are certain contracts that have certain hourly requirements attached to it. And depending upon which city those contracts operate in, what those hourly labor rates are. So, yeah, you can pay what you want to pay. That's nice. But if you're bidding on certain types of contracts, those contracts tell you what you have to pay. And you have to pay that, and you have to prove that you're paying that. Cybersecurity compliance. The government, 2 years ago, the government adopted something called zero-sum trust. You have to prove certain things to gain access to the government system. The Buy American Act. This is where that I'm going to subcontract all of my administrative service overseas and pay $1.99 or $2.99 for my administrative services. Well, if you're a government contractor, there are certain countries you can't do work with. There are certain, I'm going to go here. There's certain times that you can't use any foreign people that are working outside of the U.S., period. You have to have American workers on your contracts. That's just it. That's all. Buy American Act and the Fair Trade Agreement Act. There are certain countries listed that you cannot do business with, period. You need to keep track of who those countries are. You need to keep track of where the source of your goods are. So if you're purchasing from an approved government country, but that country is purchasing from an unapproved country, you're still responsible for knowing that. The expert controls and compliance. If you're selling to countries that we're not supposed to be doing business with, you're responsible for knowing that. Ethics and code of conduct. Every government contractor should have a code of ethics written down. If it's in your head, it's no good. We've talked about this, running your business out of your head. Nobody should be running their business out of their head. You're not running a business if you're running it out of your head. We're talking about the 15 key areas of compliance every government contractor needs to be covering. Equal, hold that thought, that I wrote down this equal employment opportunity. Every government contractor has to have an equal opportunity policy. Everyone, all of them. And you need, the big contractors have to report it every year. Every small contractor has to have it if requested. There was talks of making it a rule that all government contractors have to turn it in. Last time I looked, it wasn't a requirement to submit it annually for small contractors, but be on the lookout. Eventually, they're going to make it a requirement to submit it. So just have it. Reporting and record keeping, September 3rd. Tune into the Contractors Roundtable. We're going to talk about that at length. Contract performance and quality assurance. Yes, we're going to talk about that. It's not enough to perform. It's not enough to perform. You have to maintain quality. And you need a policy and procedure around that. I do not know why people think because it's in your mind, everybody you hire will understand what's in your mind. I do not play an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV, but I'm going to tell you, having these policies and procedures written out also protects you legally. Environment and sustainability compliance. Every government contractor is required to have that as an area of compliance. And you should have a policy written out around it, especially in construction. Government property management. If you do anything that requires you to purchase anything that you're then turning around selling to the government, you need to have a policy for purchasing. You need to have a policy for sending it to the government, you need to have a policy for record keeping. Sign up for my contractors roundtable. You need to have an accounting system for tracking. You can't have this thing where you think you bought it and you think you sold it, because if you can't produce that you bought it and you can't prove that you sold it, but you're trying to bill it, then the government's going to say no. And debarment and suspension. Let me tell you something about debarment and suspension. You can be suspended from pursuing government contracts. If your non-compliances are egregious enough, they can say for a period of time you can no longer pursue government contracts. Don't think you can prop up a new company and do it anyway, because they're debarring the individuals as well. They're suspending the executives. Good morning, Miss Cannon. They're suspending the executives as well. Oh, they changed the rules a while ago, back in 2020, because they got hit to the fact that they were doing suspensions and debarment, and people were flipping companies to get around it. So what they said was, we are suspending and debarring the executives. And debarment means you are kicked out and can no longer bid or pursue government contracts. What does that mean? I'm telling you what that means. That means if I was debarred, I can no longer pursue government contracts. That means I could not even be an executive in a company pursuing government contracts. I could not sit in a CEO suite, the C-suite of a company pursuing government contracts, because I have been debarred. Well, how do they know? Because every year, government contractors have to submit a listing of their executives. These are 15 areas of compliance every government contractors need to monitor. I do a talk called Monitoring the Unseen, and people sleep on government compliance. People sleep on compliance, period. And there's this stat that's running around here where people talk about 80% of businesses fail. And I really believe the failure is because people do not like to talk about compliance. It's not sexy. It's like washing clothes. It's a necessary evil that nobody wants to talk about. So you don't talk about it. It's not like, everybody, if I was talking about proposal writing, I would have 500 people in my live. I would have 1,000,000 likes, and I would be getting gifts out the wazoo. But because I'm talking about what it takes to scale and build a solid foundation, I don't have a live full of people. Because I'm talking about what it takes to keep your money, I don't have a live full of people. I'm a voyeur, so to speak, and I pop in and out of these other lives. These people, some of these people are telling you what you want to hear versus what you need to hear. And that's fine because people have that option. However, when you run into trouble, because that is something that some of my compadres talk about, some of my confederates talk about, and it's also why small businesses have a hard time getting subcontracts, because you don't want to hear what it takes to really scale and grow. You want the hype, but you don't want the sustainable. You want the whipped cream, but you don't want the cake. You want the pep rally, but you don't want the sustainability. Get the meat. You need the meat and the potatoes, not the chicken broth. That's what we're talking about. Um, so I know there's more than 15 weeks left in the year. So every Friday for the remainder of the year, I'm going to cover one area of compliance. I'm not going to tell that lie. So I'm going to back up off what I was getting ready to say. So roundtable, contractors roundtable is coming up. We're talking about record keeping. That's September. In October, I'm going to pick another area of compliance, and that's the roundtable. October 1st is the beginning of the new year. And I always do a welcome to the new year's live. I'm inviting you to that masterclass today. So look for that registration. I'm also launching the Contractors Challenge. There's a 30-day version and there's a 90-day version of that challenge. Go to the Contractors Training Center. You will see the registration for it. Sign up because we're getting started. The first emails will go out in September for the Contractors Challenge. It officially starts in October. There's pre-work that goes out in September. There's pre-work that goes out in September. I understand I go live at dark 30 in the morning. I don't know why people think 7:30 is early. I don't know why. 7:30 is not early. Especially for government contractors. When I was working on project, I used to be to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. Government contractors on the hill workers are up at 6 o'clock. That's one of the reasons I started going live early, is because I used to have to reschedule my live because I was listening to congressional hearings, and I'm like, okay, I want to listen to this hearing and report back on it, and I used to have to keep rescheduling my live, so I just decided to just go live early. And my evenings is for my kids, unless something earth-shattering has happened. So that's that. So join me tomorrow morning. Okay, yes, I'm going live tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to do a weekly wrap-up. I have a doctor's appointment, so tomorrow's an Integrity Live, so we're only doing a wrap-up. 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And next week is the Democratic National Convention. I am covering the convention to see what they're talking about, to see if we get an official platform release and how that platform affects you as a government contractor, you as a business. And if not, we're just going to talk about what's going on in Congress and the Senate. So with that, keep in mind, everybody, there's a compliance factor to everything. And non-compliances are expensive. Non-compliances will cause you to go out of business. And we all work too hard. We all put in too much blood, sweat, and tears to allow one non-compliance to shake our foundation. It's just that simple. So I will see everybody tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Luciana Turner. I am the founder of the LT&A Consulting Group, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.